Marija, for joining us today for the Meet the Speaker series. We're very excited to welcome you on campus for EduFest 2026 on the 5th of June. I'm always intrigued to hear more about people's job titles and what exactly does that entail. So could you maybe tell us who you are, what your job title is, and what does that really mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me. I'm really excited to join you next year and be part of the fest. So I am the executive director of Safe Online. And as you can imagine, executive director is normally a very boring title and it entails a lot of things that nobody wants to know about in terms of what happens on the back end of the organization. But the fancy title also comes with a lot of, I think, responsibilities. So the main thing that I do as the lead of my organization is I find myself in these intersections of really interesting debates and discussions between policymakers, industry leaders, children, civil society organizations around what does humanity look like in the digital age. So I really need to understand both the technology behind all of that, but also understand the human aspects, like how do humans experience this and how do humans benefit from technologies at the same time through all the transitions that we are going through as societies impacted by those developments. So that's where I kind of need to be to do my job well. But then I also, the second part of that is I need to bring that knowledge and that intelligence and that data back to my work, to our fund, where we need to decide how does that knowledge shape our investment decisions? Like where do we need to put our funds into to make sure that we are really supporting the future in which children can be safe, can experience well-being while at the same time using digital technologies. And then we look into the policies we need to be investing into the research and data, what technology tools we need, how can we equip educators, civil society, parents, policymakers to make better decisions and enable kids to really thrive in the digital age.
It sounds not only like a fascinating position in, but also like a very busy one. How did you find
Yes.
yourself in this role? Was this something that you always were kind of on the lookout for? Or oftentimes people will say, well, it kind of happened without me really knowing. What's your story?
So, I mean, I can tell you the story in which, like, oh, this was always meant to be, or like the story where, like, I just ended up working what I'm where I'm working. I think, like, retroactively, it was sort of meant to be. But so I come from Montenegro. I grew up in the Balkans in a really turbulent moment in time. When I was growing up, a civil war was raging in ex-Yugoslavia, and I was unfortunately firsthand able to see what violence that does to children. And I think through that experience personally, but also seeing my friends and families around us, I think as that little girl, I've decided that prevention of violence will be something that I want to work on. And then throughout the journey, I joined UNICEF. I was, studying political science. And then I always found myself curious about that intersection of innovation and our ability to respond to some of the challenges that children are facing. And through that work, I slowly started realizing, or fast, because technology is moving fast, that there won't be a single aspect of children's lives, whether we speak about education, skills, socializing, learning, whatever you want to mention, that won't be impacted by digital technologies. And there it became imperative for me to really shift the focus from pure child protection to looking into how tech will shape our choices when it comes to prevention of harm and violence to kids. And that's how I went from UNICEF to the End Violence Global Partnership, and then establishing Safe Online as one of the main pillars of that organization now. And now we are an independent fund. So for me, I think this is beyond just a job or a title or position. It really is my life's calling, and I will work on this issue no matter what. So yeah, retroactively, I can connect the dots, but yeah, otherwise, I think it was a set of potential like random stellar constellations, whatever, that brought me there.
I hope this isn't taking it too far, but I think that it's also a beautiful example of how we are shaped by the environment in which we grow up in. And we all have a choice in a way, or the ones of us that are privileged and lucky enough to do so, of that choice of making something good out of it, or in a way, letting ourselves go into it, right? Having grown up in Colombia in the 90s, also in the middle of a lot of security issues and turmoil. I know a little bit of that, not to the same extent as you, but I think it's so inspiring. Thank you for sharing that. Tell us a little bit about what EduFest attendees can expect from your session.
Yes, I've been thinking a lot about this. How do I bring to life the issues that we deal with? And I think in many ways, as digital technologies are so pervasive, and as humans, we, even you and I now are doing this interview on Zoom. Like that was not something we would have done like 5 years ago. And I think people viscerally feel the impact of technologies, social media, on societies and democracies and the way that we participate, we work. So I think I really want to make sure that people can understand how all of that is not only impacting us, but also really children in really, I think, sensitive development stages. And particularly, I want to focus on AI because, again, AI is a hot topic, but for a reason. The way that in which AI is shaping societies currently and our lives is really happening at speeds which are beyond human scale. We have not seen this level of change in such a short period of time. So I really want to make sure that we can share with the participants a lot of exciting new data, new stories, stories that are really human stories, not only just numbers that mean nothing at times, and show them how all of these developments are reshaping childhoods and how these reshaped childhoods can then impact the futures of the humanity. We will try to really particularly focus on children's experiences, but also I want to discuss how we can maximize. So not all is doom and gloom when it comes to technologies. I really want to see and explore with the participants of how we can maximize the good sides of technologies, and then at the same time minimize the harms and the risks, which are really exponentially growing. And in that sense, I will want to really expand on their understanding on the harms that we are seeing right now, and explaining, actually exploring with them what we can do now as parents, educators, and societies while we wait for industry and policymakers to actually introduce some actual regulation and standards that can, provide guardrails around this issue, which we are trying to work on. We are trying to influence this aspect, but at the same time, it can't wait. So we need to explore as communities, what can we do right now to protect kids from harms that are happening right now?
And I recently came across the concept of long-termism from a book that I read by William McCaskill, What We Owe the Future. And to me, it was really interesting while reading that I had never really concerned myself with the idea of not just my descendants or my grandchildren or my great-grandchildren, but 100,000 years from now.
Yeah.
And how my actions today and our decisions collectively today will, of course, have an impact also that further down the road, right? And I think, not to sound the alarm, but I think that one of the reasons why it's so important that we have these conversations now, as you said, is things are changing at a speed that we cannot comprehend and that we have probably not seen before. Do you find in a lot of your conversations that this question of the time frame comes up a lot?
Well, there's a lot of, like, recently, because I'm really trying to spend, I'm in my middle ages, so I'm really trying to spend as much time as I can with kids and with young people, because what we're hearing from them is really this overwhelm that they're feeling because of that long-termism, because they viscerally feel it for some reason. They have much more information. They have much more a sense of obligation towards the future of the planet and the future generations than any generation so far. And that is creating both opportunities for them to become activists and do something about it, but also create this paralysis at times. And a lot of kids are experiencing a plethora of mental health issues because they find themselves in this position of wanting to do something but feeling that they actually can't because things are moving too fast. So it's a really interesting perspective of how can you maintain that long-term thinking at the same time seeing how incrementally you actually can be an agent of change. Because sometimes if you take that look of, like, and I've read a lot of sci-fi books and I love sci-fi. So, like, thinking about these, like, scenarios in which the world will tremendously change, but not taking that as a deterministic view, but more like, how can I make small moves? I think, was it Amy Webb? She is the futurist, like a very, I think, interesting thinker around technologies. And she says oftentimes how if you find yourself driving on the ice, and then you need to brake. Like, if you just brake, you're done because the car goes spinning. But if you start navigating small moves, you can actually try to find a way to go through that slippery moment. And I think we are currently now in a slippery moment. So go through a slippery moment in a way that's going to help you navigate, stay on course, and then survive. So I think we need to, like, think about these small moves we can do now with a long-term that is kind of ahead of us. Yeah, so that's the way how I approach that.
I love that. That's a great example. You mentioned sci-fi, and so I want to take the opportunity to also ask you a little bit about what you do. What does Marija do when she's not thinking about the impact of technology on our children, on the future, when you're not looking at numbers and data and going to conferences and so on? Maybe your favorite book as a child, or a read that you read recently, a book that you read recently that you are really enthusiastic about. It could be music, it could be TV show or a movie, anything like that at all.
Well, I mean, it's not that I always think about it, but for me, like I think it's inevitable to think about my work. Um, I did think about multiple things that I can share in terms of what I'm reading and watching. And when I'm not watching Bluey with my daughter or stuff like that, I am really trying to stay on top with yeah, the world. So the thing that would want everybody to read, one book that I would want everybody to read, and this is going to maybe be a controversial choice, but it is the book called The Anxious Generation, written by Jonathan Haidt. And the book has really sparked a fair bit of debate around, is the data that is being used correct or is it not, and stuff like that. And it definitely has a bias towards Western perspective and Western context, which I think is a fair point. But it really offers a thought-provoking insight into how parenting styles have changed over the last few decades and how technology as a mediating factor has really shaped childhoods. And it speaks about those links, and I'm not going to say causality relationships because those are still not established, but links between how the advent of technologies, change of parental styles, change of societies has impacted how kids are now feeling and experiencing the world. And again, it speaks about the mental health crisis that young people find themselves in, the skyrocketing rates of anxiety, depression, self-harm, suicidal rates, soaring between the young people. So I think it's a really pertinent and timely book. Not only is it safe for parents, because it is not only parents who need to read this, it is aunts and uncles and friends and educators, professionals who need to understand how these changes are impacting societies and what it means for the future of what societies and the values we're going to have will be as we move ahead. So I strongly recommend the book. It has downfalls, it has some benefits to it, but I think it has really created movement, and many countries are even legislating based on just the findings from that book, which is really like amazing to see the impact of one book so profoundly across geographies as well. So The Anxious Generation, please read.
Thank you for that recommendation. What about your musical tastes? When you want to disconnect and you shut the laptop, your daughter's not at home, and you just want your me time, what's one song or one artist that you will put on play?
So my musical taste is insane. So I go from like everything. I like jazz. Jazz is my first love. But I also like to explore new forms of music. So I like electronica a lot. I like to see eclectic types of music and so on. But recently, and again, you're gonna think that I only work. I really don't. But it was such a coincidence. We were just about to launch this Safe Online for Mental Health initiative with the World Health Organization. In the midst of that, I discovered this album by, and I've never heard of him before. Maybe it's a complete mistake, but like Father John Misty. He's an American cant author. I love him now. But his new album, Mahash Mashana, I think it is the name, if I pronounce it correctly. But there is a song called Mental Health, which is so wonderful. The song is just like so lush, and it's like orchestral arrangements, and it's like really beautiful to hear. I oftentimes really need to close my eyes, and I like to listen to it in dark. Like it's so like it really absorbs your entire being. But at the same time, it has this really interesting satirical lyrics and account of societies and issues of identity, and just it's. I think it's like a wonderful, wonderful account of the absurdity of modern life. So, Mental Health by Father John Misty.
Obviously, screens and technology has a lot to do with your work. Does that mean then you never find yourself in front of a screen to watch TV or a movie? Do you consciously kind of step away from that, or does that still happen that you'll watch something, watch something?
Well, that has changed throughout my life. I can tell you one thing because you're Colombian. I learned to speak Spanish through telenovelas. I was like a huge aficionado of telenovelas. Seriously, I know them all. So if you want to ever talk about telenovelas, we can do it. So, but that was my previous life. That was for me the way to disconnect when I was a student. I was really like binging all of them. Currently, I don't own a TV. I don't think that many people. I don't know, do people own TVs anymore? But I do sometimes stream and watch certain things on my computer. But it's very rare because like if you don't have TV there, like you don't even think about it. And I'm prefer to play with my daughter. She is 4 years old and she hasn't had any exposure to screens until she was 3. And now she has like 15 minutes a day or every other day of like small amounts of that, like I think like sugar, as you will, like video screen time sugar that we give them. But recently I have, because of the work that I find myself in, a lot of the colleagues and everybody, all of my LinkedIn and social media was like bursting with this one TV show from Netflix called Adolescence.
Right.
And I think you will assume hopefully everybody has seen it. But again, it is a story about basically what we work on, the issues of young people, families, and the impacts of social media, toxic masculinity. I think the issues around like manosphere, Andrew Tate type of thing, impacting lives of young boys, in a place where I really think that we should consider not only how we regulate the digital world, but also how do we create off-ramps from being online to going back to nature, culture, creativity, exploration that doesn't include screens or technologies. And I think really like the TV show has really awakened a lot of people. So it's now easy for me to say like, have you seen Adolescence? Yes. Okay, then I can explain to you like what, in better terms, what we do. But it's a really, I think, it's a hard watch. Like, so, unless you're ready to, absorb really difficult issues, I would say don't watch it. But like, I think it's a really important piece of TV. And it is like, I think TV can still, culture and art can still change the way that humans still see societies.
Right. I was going to say, I think what can be so powerful is how it really can serve as a conversation starter, right?
Yeah.
And oftentimes give us a different perspective or put us in an uncomfortable position if you're ready to be put in that position, to even question some things that we take for granted. So I think absolutely there can be some benefits to that. We're slowly but surely arriving at the end of our time together this morning. Is there anything else that you would like to share with the audience?
I really look forward to the EduFest. I'm really honored to be part of it. I will be there. Ask me anything about technology, kids, how we live in this age and day. But if you have any advice for me on how to start a farm, I'm actually thinking about farming. So that's one thing that I want to like talk to people more about. Because again, as I said, like off ramps of this hyper-connected world are going to be so critical. So I'm dreaming about owning a farm and opting out of connectivity for a while. So if anybody has some good advice for me, I'm going to be there as well.